Hello, wild ones. This is Dark Moon Chiron, the little corner of the universe where together we illuminate the secrets of your dreams, your subconscious, and your forgotten self. This is a storytelling dream interpretation podcast, and I'm your guide, Megan Rose McMullen, the Wild Dream Sorceress. This podcast is structured in 3 parts. Beginning the dream journey, I share the story of a sleeper's adventure. Whether the dream is my own or one that was submitted, I speak in first person for anonymity because let's face it, sometimes our dreams can be quite wild. Once we follow the dreamer's quest entirely, we decipher each piece of the labyrinth, unlocking new levels of consciousness along the way. Then the enchanted tale ends with an intuitive reading on the inner workings of the hero's psyche, hopefully leaving you, the listeners, with a new understanding of the innate magic and power that lies inside the hidden world within each of us. Allow the story to transform your ordinary waking lives into your wildest dreams. Or at the very least, strap in and enjoy this imaginary ride. Are you ready to get wild? Part 1, The Tree of Death. Help, help, calling all superheroes. A signal is sent out to all superheroes in the vicinity. There's a vampire-like tree sucking the life out of the people in a little town called Craven Crypt. It has magical powers. It lets off a special sound frequency that any human within 20 feet of it will be lulled into a sleepy trance. And that's when it strikes. It uses its roots to come up out of the ground under its victims. If it's hungry enough, it will jab them through the heart, sucking the blood out of them entirely. But most of the time, its tentacles will only nick them slightly, stealing the smallest drops. With a person's blood, it can control their mind and make them do its bidding, and when it's finished with them, it will eat them alive. This little town never stood a chance. They had been picked off one by one, either by a tree or each other. They thought they had solved the problem by chopping it down to a stub. The townspeople had a false sense of security because it didn't work. The tree still lets off a low hum, calling to anyone who might be passing by. Unfortunately, for the people of Craven Crypt, the Tree of Death blocks the only way in or out. Luckily, I'm part of a superhero club. There are 5 of us. We've been working and training for our whole lives for this. To answer the call, we all walk into a local orange store. It decked out with the latest gadgets. We pick our weapons of choice as if it's a video game. The large TV screen flashes adverts for new computers and phones, and in between each product, there's a new pop music video. At this moment, a K-pop dance song plays with the dancing pink cupcakes and hamsters. It's a very cheery cartoon-like energy for such a forlorn place. I go straight for the watermelon headphones. These will block out the sun and trick the tree. Normally, its victims don't move in their hypnotic state. I'm unsure of what each of the others picked, but I trust them because we know what we're doing and we will succeed. Once we are ready, we band together to fight the tree. Where the massive oak tree once stood, a pathetic stump remains. We won't be fooled by its ridiculous appearance. It's a deadly monster. It's in an open field, bright green grass, and it's nearly dusk. The sun is going down, so it hides just behind the distant forest. We spread out around the stump of death. In unison, we begin to circle it in a ritualistic pattern. Sensing our movement, its needle-sharp roots spring out of the ground, trying to grab our legs. Barely missing my counterpart, it spears the air violently. Clumps of dirt are flying. The scent of earth fills my nose, and pure chaos exudes. It's exhilarating and scary. I'm worried about the others getting hurt. We continue. We spin, kick, and flip around like trained professionals dancing for life or death. In turn, we tie up the root limbs, knotting them so they can't sneak back into underground, only to shoot up again in surprise attacks. The monster is in distress, but we aren't done yet. We won't stop until it's dead. While the limbs are tangled, the others pry the rest of the stump up, and I finish it off by running, jumping high into the sky, coming down with 2 hands on a metal cross dagger right into the center of the growth rings. Smoke billows out of it and starts withering up and dying. In the end, it looks like a small pile of dried sticks. I stand, dust off my hands, pull one earbud out, K-pop playing still as I grin and say, "Good work, team." We had an audience watching our performance, and everyone cheers. Our team high five, circles up, and jumps around in celebration. I knew we would win. We've been training for this our whole lives, and the superheroes do it again. So, are you a kind of person who is on a budget and wants to get one of your dreams interpreted? Well, guess what? I have something for you. I have mini readings where you, the listener, can type in the email or voice note your dream, send it to me, and then I will send you a voice note or an email back of the interpretation. Isn't that cool? Because I think a lot of people sometimes when they first start off, they think that dream interpretation is like a little bit more complicated than it actually is. But guess what? It's not. It's not. And I can help you decipher your dreams so that you can do it. And obviously you can learn as well with the workbook and the courses as well. But if you're not into that and you just want to kind of learn what your dreams mean, send in a mini reading. In the description or in the show notes, like that's where you can find the link. And I would love to interpret your dream. So we're at part 2 of the Tree of Death. So it's an extraordinary dream, meaning that it's just full of details. I divided it up in, if you guys are interested in the breakdown sheet, there's a link in the show notes for the free breakdown sheets. It's also part of the workbook, but I just use these to kind of help break down making notes before giving the reading. So I broke it into 3 sections. First, you have the observer section, which is kind of getting the info. It's the call to the superheroes. You're kind of getting the information of the dream. The second part is the participation, and it's preparing for the fight. You're at the orange store. And then 3, the section 3 is a participant, and you're fighting the tree with your team. And so those are the 3 sections. So observer usually is like a sated being, right? It's kind of alluding to that. And then participant is doing, right? So being versus doing. And so there's like a fear, there's like a monster, which is very indicative of the shadow as well. In the beginning, the first scene, it's kind of dull when you're kind of thinking about this. There's not a lot of lighting. The second scene is very bright when you're preparing for it. It's cheery. The third section is dusk, so there's more shadow than there is light. Remember, the sun is hiding. And so let's just talk about, so there's that. We're talking about the archetype of the vampire again. We're also getting the superhero, right, which is the another archetype, the superhero archetype, right, which is like someone with power, right? I think a lot of times when I think of superhero powers, I think about powers, and not just the power of like, invisibility or whatever. I think of like they have like they're like more powerful than most people, right? Because they have training and they have this like ability that goes beyond just the ordinary mundane life, right? The townspeople feels like the collective, because they're like they've done some things. They thought this, like they did this thing to try to fix the problem by chopping it in half, but it didn't actually solve the problem. That's why they're calling and reaching out. They have the self-inflicted stuff because they're ticking themselves off one by one, because it's not because they're being controlled by a monster or the shadow, right? But it's kind of like I feel like it's kind of alluding to the fact of like there's like an inner thing that like a lot of times what we do to ourselves. So but we'll get into that in the third part with a deeper dive. So yeah, the dreamer is from a small town. That's not the name of the small town. We changed it. The orange store, been there a couple times as adult for phone repairs. Nothing really there's an open field location where the stump is. So you have the small town, which you're part of, the orange store, which is where you get the weapons and stuff like that. And then you got the open field, which is like where you should have freedom, but it seems to be blocking the path. So we have the townspeople and the club members, right? So it's a group of them. They're mixed gender or non-binary. We don't really know, but it's just a mix. And so this is really alluding to collective shadow. The identities or roles are superhero, friend, and partners. Some positive traits, you're looking for justice. You got the powerful trait, they're capable, right? Like the dreamer states multiple times, like, I knew we were going to win. We've been training for this our whole lives. 5 is linked to communication, balance, senses, and actually cheeriness, which I think is interesting. Tree of Death is the opposite archetype of the Tree of Life. So the Tree of Life is about birth and creation, whereas Tree of Death is like destruction, right? So we got that. We got some gadgets and some technology, the tree, the dancing, a rhythmic, ritualistic pattern, the circling. It seems like a dance, like that has been a kind of common theme. Music, low hum, frequency, headphones, senses. Yeah. We talk about the stump. We take a tree and make it to a stump. We kind of, destroy the tree. We got cupcakes and hamsters, which is kind of contrasting to the scary tree, right? Got the watermelon, which is more fruit. You get the watermelon from the orange store. Blood, mind control, trance, hypnotic. You got the earth element, right? You're smelling the earth. The earth comes up, the clumps of mud, dirt, whatever. There's like a confidence too that's there. Like we know that we're going to do this. It's really, and it's the confidence there. And then you have the exhilaration and also scary. So I would say this is probably an extraordinary dream mixed with a nightmare or a night terror. It probably wouldn't be a night terror technically, but it could have been. Yeah. So the vampire also is like, theme is there too. 1, you have the dagger, and 2, you have the sucking of the blood. There's celebrations, there's tying of knots, looping circles. The phrase "didn't stand a chance" is kind of interesting that's out. Dusting hands off is kind of dust your hands off, like you did a good job, well done. Yeah. So one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting is that the townspeople kind of did this, like made this choice of chopping down a tree, but like made it worse because now you can't see the tree as much. And so like you can warn a person, but now you're going to walk by it and it's still going to make that low hum. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Tell me what you guys like heard in that. Like, what are some common themes that maybe like stood out to you? Yeah, those are the kind of things that I thought were very interesting things as I was reading it. There's like this false sense of security can also be tied to like lulled into a trance, right? And I think that this is interesting that it also is in combination to a technology store, right? So I think that that's really, really it for that one. Let's go to part 3. So part 3, my favorite part. So yeah, I think that this is interesting because, in the collective unconscious, there is a big call for justice, right? There are these like monsters that we think, like we might not think that they are monsters, but they end up being monsters. They're kind of you know, I think it's kind of interesting. I think this is definitely talking about the collective unconscious. This is a very collective unconscious shadowy dream, because you start off with shadow and then you move to brightness and then you start to shadow. So brightness always is correlated to consciousness and awareness, where the more dark is closer to the unconscious, right? You don't have individual here. There's no individual. It's always groups. It's the people, the townspeople of the small town, and then you have the club members. There's 5 of them. We don't really know much about them besides that they're superheroes and they're fighting for justice. They're capable. They're powerful. We can trust them. And so I would definitely think that this is a call for coming from the collective about finding justice and helping the world from destruction, right? The tree of death, like there's this like fear that the world is ending, or like our society is crumbling, and like people are really worried about it, and we all have specific power within our own collective, some more than others, right? Some of us are privileged, right? So superheroes have this privilege. They have a deeper power that you've been preparing for, like your whole, like when we talk about like the innate power within each of us, most of the time our whole life has been preparing us for our part. This is, our life is for us, not against us, and it's not happening to us, it's happening for us. And like what it's doing is it's creating and building you. What's that saying that like, I prayed to God and got for courage, and God gave me situations so that I could be brave. I prayed for God for strength, and God gave me situations that called me, whether gave me situations where I can get stronger, that kind of thing. I feel like whether you believe in God or whatever, I think like that's kind of what our story is. Our whole story is just kind of these like interconnected parts of us are building our message and our power, right? Our inner power, our innate power. And that's like the whole point of the collective unconscious, is that our subconscious can dip into this collective and bring out these like cool things to the awareness, and that's kind of what we've been doing over the last few years, has really been calling out these like really monster destructive patterns and cycles, generational cycles, patterns, trauma that have just been perpetuated, and we're trying to fix that. And I think that this is what this dream is like really calling to, is like calling to justice, help the world with your specific power. And what your specific story might be is not a superhero per se, but like maybe you are a superhero to your kids, or maybe you're a superhero in your job. Maybe you're a superhero who shows up and smiles at every time you go to the coffee, or you tip people more, or you're giving and you're generous, and you're that's your superpower. Like it doesn't necessarily mean like something very, very special and big, like a superhero, but like we're training this for our whole life, right? And like that is specifically us. And you've prepared for this. And I also think that this is sharing to your communication skills because of the number 5. So I think this is like a verbal expression, using your voice, saying, because we were talking about sound a bunch, right? We got the trees letting off a low frequency that puts you in a hypnotic trance. I think that this is also a double like meeting, where one, our technology is putting us into this like hypnotic trance, and it kind of like causing us to like be our own worst enemies sometimes. So I think that this is kind of a cool kind of flip, because we do need to use our voices, and we do need to use technology to do these things, because we're so connected. But at the same time, there's this like monstery side to technology and social media, right? This side that makes us feel like we have to be big all the time, or we have to live this big, extraordinary life, that everything is curated, or these things. And that's kind of the dark side, I guess you would say, of technology. And so although it is a very powerful tool. Sometimes it can be so overwhelming that it can kind of eat us alive. Vampire, sucking the energy out of us. I also think that they're like, so when we talk about death specifically, a lot of times in dreams, death is literally a death of a version of us that needs to fall away. Like a version of, so let's keep talking about the technology. Maybe there's a version of you that is holding on to a coping mechanism of scrolling, and even though there's lots of projects that you want to do, you're scrolling, right? But that version of you is no longer cohesive to where you want to go in your goals. And so there has to be this like acceptance and death that happens. And this isn't about killing off a part of you, it's about acceptance. When we accept and merge with parts of ourselves in shadow work, that's when we get kind of this control, if you will, over them, and we can kind of command our life the way that we want it, just like we can in dreams. So there's like a discipline that might not need to be happening, a training, a ritualistic training or dance. So I think too that there is a version of you probably somewhere in your childhood. For me, I feel like the watermelon thing is there's something in your childhood that might be connected to watermelon. I didn't ask the dreamer this, but like I feel like there might be that, like somewhere in that like memory of watermelon flavor, watermelon, like did you have something watermelon shaped at some point? And like what age was that? Because I think there might be some work around stepping into your power and like the things that you come up against. So I would say the shadow work is that, like, if there's a time in your life where watermelon was like a symbol of something, like maybe chapstick, or you had like a pencil eraser or like something, it feels like there's some kind of memory there. If there's a specific time, so say 8 or 9, right? Like that's when you had this, like your favorite thing was like watermelon shaped. In that time, like what happened? What was going on that could cause you to currently not want to move forward with like stepping into your power? And that might have you scrolling or whatever. And that's kind of like what the shadow work would really do, is kind of suss out the like what is keeping you from it. Like if you have a goal, if you have a goal and you want to get there, but you cannot seem to get there, but you know you want it, and it's within you, that like it's from you, not from somebody else. So like if someone's like, oh, you should be a doctor, and your mom is like, yeah, you should be a doctor, your dad should be a doctor, and you are like, yeah, I want to be a doctor, but you don't really want to be a doctor and you're not really doing a great job, that just probably tells me that that's a personal thing that you don't want. But if you're like, yes, I want to do this specific thing, like have a podcast or write a book, whatever, you have this goal, but you cannot seem to make yourself do it, but you know you want it, like in your heart of hearts you want it, there is some kind of trauma, this block within you that is causing you to believe that you can't do this outcome. And what's happening is you're reverting to an old version of yourself that is coping with scrolling or coping with food or coping with something like that. And what happens is like it's sucking the life out of you. It literally, when it's hungry enough, it will stab the victims in the heart and suck their life. What is that? Joy. That's the heart, is the chakra of joy, right? This is where we find love and relationship, and we find so much joy in life. And if you know something is coming, you want to do something because it's bringing you joy, but you cannot seem to do it, it's not necessarily because you're depressed or because you are lazy or procrastinating, but could be something like you feel unworthy, or someone told you once that you weren't a good writer, or that someone told you once that you had to have a specific skill set in order to do something. And now in today's technology age, like you can learn all those things and you don't necessarily have to go in the right order that it used to be, like go to college, do this, get your master's, get your doctorate. Like you don't necessarily have to do all of those in that kind of order, and you don't have to do them at a specific time and age either. Like that's the thing with the technology these days is like, people are going to school, they're waiting and then going to school, or they're waiting to have kids later, or traveling all over the place and then going back to school. So they're going back like later in life. And so like we're not in that same phase anymore. We have control over our lives. And so it's really about that. And so I think too, I think one thing you could do to like invoke your child, like maybe if you're not really sure about the memory, you could probably dance to some songs, like do some dancing, engage your inner child, and see what comes up about this. Like really set the intention. I think too, like knowing that you have like people to work with, like you have a teamwork, a community, right? This is all about the collective. So like you're moving through this collective shadow. And I think it's really too that if you start working through this, you're actually going to see the fruits of your labor and you will succeed. Like that's in the conscious mind. It was the dreamer is constantly like, I know we will succeed. I know we will succeed. If that is in your subconscious, all you have to do is figure out what that block is and you will succeed. Like you just have to do a little bit more work on like sussing out what that is that's blocking you from your true joy. You know what I mean? And I think that this is really showing. So the two shadow works is one, there's a collective vampire monster thing. And then there's also the own personal shadow that's keeping us, which is both. Like a lot of times when we are born into a society full of racism and judgment and patriarchy and toxic masculinity, we ourselves have that stuff, right? We are those, like we can't separate those because we are part of that. We grow up in that and we have to deconstruct that. We have to kind of work through that stuff. And it sucks, especially if on top of the societal, you have a community where you grew up in, a family where you grew up in, and you have internalized stuff that comes from all of those as well. So sometimes these like harder things that go deep into our roots, right? We got the roots that are coming out are going to take a lot more effort to kind of uproot and like kind of get all of that out of there so that it's not sucking the life out of us, that it's not like, right, blood is the life force that runs through us. Our heart is what pumps that life force. And so when we're working on things like this, it is a lot harder, and that we do need to lean on our team and our community and our like people and mentors, etc., reading books. And knowledge is great, but like you have to implement it and put it in action. And I think that is what this club is doing, is like we've been training this for our whole life and we finally get to put it in action. And I think that that's really another kind of interpretation that you can do. I would also say, since this is scary too, that you can look at like why are you feeling scared? Like what's scary about it? Because it is scary to face our fears and to face our shadow. A lot of people don't have the capacity to do that. And so when we're working with dreams, we're really working with those like taboo you know kind of I don't know, kind of icky, sticky feelings that we're in it and we're just like, oh, this does not feel good. There's a lot of discomfort to it. But again, when we do this, we integrate into the wholeness and we bring out these like things into the light, and they become less scary and they become gifts to us, right? And this, it's saying that it's telling you have a vampire that's sucking the life out of you, and it goes really deep into the ground, but you also have like allies and assets to help you, right? You have the sound, you have the movement, you have your community, and just learn to lean on them more. And I think that that's really all that I can really say to this, do a little shadow work as always. And if you need help or you want to learn more about dream work, we have courses, the workbook available on Amazon. We have private sessions, and soon we will have podcast readings where you can submit your own dream to soon we'll open up that avenue so you can have your podcast or your dream on the podcast if that sounds like something for you. And we have a monthly dream meeting where we meet, and if you have questions or concerns, if you want VIP access to this, you have VIP access. Plus we have memberships where you have VIP access and the monthly group, and then you have the top tier one, which is VIP access a month ahead of time for the podcast, the monthly group, and you get 13 mini readings, which is included in one of the memberships as well, which mini readings are basically you email or voice note your dream to me, and then I give you a voice note and email back of like those kind of things. And so if you're curious about what your dreams mean and you don't want to wait for the podcast, we have the mini and the private. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for listening to Dark Moon Chiron. I hope you found what you're looking for and enjoyed the ride. If you'd like to share your dream adventures with the world, please head over to our website, darkmoonchiron.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, there are multiple ways to donate and support us. You can find them in the show notes. All content shared in this podcast is copyrighted by Dark Moon Chiron Incorporated 2022. All rights reserved. None of its content can be used without prior authorization. So until next time, dream big and be wild.